Some people are born leaders. Others get laughed out of the room first. He wasn't loud. He didn't wear designer shoes. He brought his lunch in a paper bag. And to most people in the office, he barely existed at all. But 7 years later, the man they dismissed, mocked, and forgot about, walked back into the same building, not as an intern, but as their new CEO. 7 years earlier, the lobby of Clarion and West buzzed with energy. Fresh coffee, shiny shoes, expensive smiles. It was intern orientation day at one of the hottest creative agencies in San Francisco. The air reeked of ambition. Among the crowd of Ivy League grads and polished LinkedIn profiles was Eli Porter, 22, wide-eyed, awkward, dressed in a second-hand blazer and tie that didn't quite match. He clutched a leather folder worn at the edges, and the only thing louder than his footsteps was the silence that followed him into every room. He didn't have connections, didn't have charisma, didn't have the right look, but he had questions. Thoughtful ones. The kind that made people uncomfortable. During a brainstorming session, he suggested that emotional resonance might convert better than trendjacking. They laughed. "This isn't a therapy session, bro," one intern joked. Another leaned over and whispered, "Who let this guy in?" A week later, after he fumbled a pitch deck due to nerves, he received a polite HR email thanking him for his time. It said nothing about his ideas, just that he wasn't the right fit for the culture. No one followed up. No one remembered his name. Eli walked out of the office with no offer, no reference, and no dignity left. But what no one realized, not then, not years later, was that Eli didn't walk away defeated. He walked away determined. He moved into a tiny apartment behind a laundromat, worked night shifts at a bookstore, and spent every spare second building something no one believed in. It started as a scribble in a notebook, then an idea, then a sketch, then a prototype. He called it Pulseframe, not a product, not a platform, a philosophy. What if brands told stories the way humans experience emotions, not the way marketers chase trends? He pitched 44 investors. 43 said no. One said, "You're not the founder type." But Eli didn't stop. In year 3, a failing startup gave Pulseframe a shot. Their emotionally driven ad campaign went viral not for the budget, not for the visuals, but because it made people cry. That one campaign turned a ghost brand into a household name. Suddenly, Pulseframe was real. By year 4, it powered over 200 campaigns. By year 5, it was acquired for $48 million by a multinational firm expanding into emotional AI. Eli stayed on, quiet, calculated, watching the landscape. And one day, an acquisition brief landed on his desk. Clarion West. The same agency, the same halls, the same logo, except now they were struggling. Outdated strategies, hollow branding, leadership in decline. Their founders were ready to sell. Eli didn't hesitate. He signed the acquisition papers. Personally, the deal closed, and a company-wide email went out. Clarion and West is proud to welcome new leadership as we enter a new era of innovation and vision. Details will be shared at the upcoming executive town hall. No one at the company knew who the new CEO was, but he remembered them all, because once upon a time, he sat at their lunch tables in silence, watched them scoff, listened as they joked about that awkward intern. Now, he was coming back, not to gloat, not to fire anyone, but to remind them and the world that being overlooked is not the same as being unworthy, because some names don't vanish. They just wait for the right moment to be written in bold. At the top of the page, Act 3, The Return. It was a Tuesday morning when the entire Clarion and West staff gathered in the company's main auditorium. Some employees looked anxious. Others scrolled through their phones. Most had heard rumors. New leadership, acquisition, executive shakeup. but no one had answers. The lights dimmed. A familiar voice, the company's COO, stepped onto the stage. "Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here on short notice. As many of you know, last quarter was our most challenging in a decade. But with new guidance and vision, we're about to enter our next phase of growth." She paused. "Please join me in welcoming our new Chief Executive Officer." A side door opened, and in walked a man in a simple, dark suit. No spotlight, no grand music, just quiet footsteps. Some whispered, others squinted. It wasn't until he reached center stage that people began to realize it was him, Eli, the intern, the quiet one, the kid they laughed at. Jaws dropped. One of the creative leads leaned toward her colleague. "That's no way. That's Eli Porter?" The COO stepped aside. Eli faced the audience. Calm. Still. Sharp. He looked out into a sea of confused faces, most of whom didn't recognize him. But a few did, and their expressions flickered with something between shock and shame. He waited a beat. Then he spoke. "7 years ago, I stood in this building. As an intern, I didn't come from a fancy school. I didn't know anyone here. I had one blazer, a borrowed Metro card, and a folder full of ideas. No one moved. I was told I didn't fit the culture, that I was too quiet, too weird, too serious." He paused, letting the silence hang. "Some of you laughed. Some of you ignored me. That's fine. You didn't owe me kindness. He turned to the left side of the room. But what no one asked was what happened to the intern after he was let go. He went home, and he built something. The screen behind him lit up. Clips of global brands, emotional ad campaigns, and testimonials from CEOs flashed on the screen, all powered by Pulseframe, the company they never knew he founded, the product that changed modern storytelling, the tool that just acquired Clarion West. The screen faded. All eyes turned back to Eli. "I didn't come back to fire anyone. I didn't come back to relive old memories." He stepped forward, voice low but firm. "I came back to rebuild the soul of this company, the part that listens before it judges, that values ideas before image, that asks not, 'Where are you from?' but, 'What do you care about?'" A hush fell across the room. One of the interns, seated near the front, slowly raised her hand. "Why now?" Eli looked at her with a small smile. "Because I remember what it felt like to be invisible. And I made a promise to myself that if I ever had the power, I'd use it to make sure no one with potential gets ignored again." A pause. "That starts today." He walked down from the stage and took a seat in the front row. Everyone stayed still for a moment. Then one person stood. Then another. Then the entire room rose in a silent standing ovation. Not out of obligation, but because they felt something real. And in that moment, Clarion West wasn't just under new leadership. It was under new meaning. Act 4. The Reckoning. The boardroom was quiet. Later that afternoon, after the standing ovation had faded and the crowd had dispersed, Eli sat across from a small group of department heads, senior managers, and founding partners, most of whom had been with Clarion West since his intern days. At the far end of the table was Jared, the once charismatic senior creative who had led the intern program 7 years ago. Jared hadn't clapped earlier. He had been too stunned to move. Now, he leaned back in his leather chair, trying to wear the same confident smirk he always used in client pitches. But it didn't stick. Eli opened a notebook. "Let's begin. No fanfare. No ceremony. Just the work." The first topic, culture. Eli flipped open a file full of employee feedback, resignation letters, Glassdoor reviews, and anonymous complaints. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't scold. He simply read a few aloud. "I've never felt more invisible in my entire career. The loudest voices always win here even when they're wrong. Talented people get ignored. Loud egos get promoted. Jared shifted in his chair. Eli looked up. "This isn't about punishment," he said. "It's about patterns." Someone cleared their throat. One of the marketing VPs, a woman named Natalie, raised her hand. "I think we owe you an apology, Eli." "No," he said. "You don't." Everyone looked at him, confused. "You don't owe me anything," Eli continued. "What you owe is honesty. To yourselves. To this team. To the people you didn't see." Silence. It continued. "I know what it feels like to sit in a room and speak and have no one hear you. I also know what happens when companies stop listening, not just to interns, but to customers, to creatives, to their own purpose." He stood, walked slowly to the whiteboard, and wrote one word in large block letters. "Listen," then turned back to the room. "From this day forward, no one will be hired here without understanding this word, and no one will stay here if they forget it." A long pause. Some nodded, some swallowed hard. Jared finally spoke. Voice low. "You really remember all of it, don't you?" Eli looked at him. "Every word." Jared looked down. "I was wrong about you." Eli gave a faint smile. "You weren't wrong about me. You just didn't look long enough to see the whole story." The next day, an internal memo went out to the entire company. It wasn't written by PR. It wasn't edited by legal. It was written by Eli, in his own voice. It read, "Success has made this company visible, but it's how we treat the invisible, the quiet ones, the overlooked, the underestimated, that will define what we become next. If you've ever been unheard, unseen, or underestimated, this is your company now. Welcome." Across social media, the story exploded. Former interns shared their own experiences. Clients reposted the memo. A tech publication ran a headline, "The intern who became CEO and brought humanity back to the boardroom." To CEO. End of 60. If this story hits something deep inside you, maybe you've been underestimated too. Share your experience in the comments. Someone out there might need to read it today. Act 5. The Legacy. 3 months later, Clarion and West felt like a different company. Not because the logo changed, not because Eli sat at the top, but because people began to speak, and more importantly, they began to listen. Conference rooms that were once dominated by the loudest voices now had space for silence's space, for the intern with the trembling hands, the designer who had never spoken in a pitch meeting, the soft-spoken analyst with brilliant but buried ideas. A new internship program launched. It was called the Quiet Ones Initiative. Applicant didn't need connections. They didn't need perfect resumes. They needed one thing, a story they believed in. On a rainy Thursday, Eli walked past the front desk and noticed a young intern nervously fumbling with her ID badge. He smiled. She looked up. "I'm sorry, too new." "That's okay," he said gently. "I was too. You were an intern here? A long time ago. And now, you're the CEO." Eli paused for a moment, then smiled wider. I'm just someone who stuck around long enough to be heard." The girl blinked, unsure if she was supposed to laugh. "Don't worry," Eli added. "One day, you'll have your own story to tell. Just make sure you listen to others while you're writing it." She nodded slowly, unsure what to say, but her eyes said everything. He nodded back and continued down the hall. Weeks later, at an industry conference, Eli was asked during a keynote, "What's your proudest moment as CEO so far?" He thought for a second, then replied, "It's not when we landed a big account, not when our campaign won an award. It's the moment I walked back into that company and no one recognized me." The audience murmured, because in that moment, I realized, if no one saw me back then, it meant I could rebuild everything from scratch. And this time, I'd do it right. He looked straight at the audience. "To anyone who's ever felt invisible, you're not broken. You're just early." Applause filled the room, not thunderous, but sincere. From the back row, someone whispered, That guy just changed my life. Eli walked off stage. Calm and quiet, just like always. He never shouted. He never needed to. Because now, the whole world was listening. If you've ever felt like the quiet one in the room, someone others overlooked, this story is for you. And if it meant something to you, maybe share it. Because somewhere, someone like you is still waiting to be seen. Subscribe for more stories like this. The kind that remind us, it's not how loud you are, it's how true you are.